Hello, welcome. It is All for United. We are back again. Feels like quite a while actually since we were last here, but it was only the weekend, not all that long ago at all. We're back for more Manchester United reaction, and something tells me that this one might end up getting a little bit spicier than perhaps some evenings that we have had, but who knows? It's just a little whim and a little idea that I've got, but we shall see. Let's just double check how everybody is. First of all, as you can see, I've gone for Daz and Dan today. Daz, how are you, sir? You all right?
Yeah, I've been good. I'm actually looking forward to this one because I've not done a post game with All for United yet. It's the one podcast I've not been part of, so I'm really looking forward to this one.
Okay, well, let's hope you're still happy to have joined it by the time we reach the end of it. So we'll see. Dan, of course, you're here. Your background's back, and you made it almost on time. So how you doing?
I'm going to blame the black background, and that's why I was late. No, I'm good. Just feeling a bit indifferent. Not sure what to make of the performance yesterday. I don't know. It's a hard place to be at the minute, to be honest, Man United fan-wise.
Yeah, it's a funny one, that's for sure. And of course, JJ is here. So hello, sir. Lovely to see you. Right, well, let's get ourselves straight into it, I suppose. And I'm a bit like you, Dan. The game finished, and I just sort of felt weird. Like, I don't know, it's a draw, but I didn't feel like we'd won, obviously. I didn't feel like we'd lost. I didn't have any major feelings one way or the other. I wouldn't quite go as far as to say I was apathetic because I wasn't. You know, I wanted us to win and I was annoyed that we hadn't because I felt like we could have. But it was a strange feeling. Like the other games we come out of feeling like we played really well. In this one, I didn't necessarily come out of it thinking we'd played really well. Equally, I didn't think like we deserved to lose. We'd scored a goal, and I just wasn't quite sure. And I think there was a number of things that contributed to that. So, Dan, we'll come to you first with regards to the lineup. You have been a heavy hitter when it came to talking about rotation of the side. And I have been on the other side of that argument religiously, saying don't change a winning team. Now, I'm not sitting here and saying we've been a winning team, but we did have 2 wins on the trot. And he's made some little tweaks, little changes after each of those games. They were weird ones, I felt this time. Again, Maguire coming in, I didn't think was the end of the world for Dillett. You know, we've got no major dramas with Maguire, and I don't think we can really put too much onto the defence for that one. But Ugarte for Mainu, and the big one for me again, we brought Rashford on. Felt like they were reasonably good changes, bearing in mind the people that we were bringing in. So what did you make of the changes to the team and the consistent rotation that seems to be happening?
I was quite surprised that he named such a strong lineup, to be honest. I thought he was going to edge towards what he did against Barnsley with the quite a few changes. I've got no dramas with the lineup, to be honest. He's picked players that should get a result against FC Twente, and they're good enough to get the result against FC Twente. It's just a really strange. I still don't think, I said on the other show, I don't think he knows his best 11 yet, or where the players are in the best positions. I still think he's sort of figuring it out. What we know from previous is Bruno Fernandes on the right wing is no good to anybody, and certain players in midfield don't work together. I was really surprised to see a lot of people go at Ugarte after that performance when other players played not as well. But I had no dramas with the lineup when I saw it. I did think there'd be a couple of more changes in there, to be honest. I thought maybe Hoyland would have got start. So it wasn't too much of me thinking, oh, we're going to get, like, it's far too much rotation. We're going to be out of sorts, whatever. There's only a few there. There still should have been enough to show a good performance to play a good game.
Interesting. Would you have gone on with that, Daz? Was you quite content with the rotation at the beginning? I mean, because I wasn't against it. I didn't look at that squad and go, oh, "What are you doing, Eric?" I felt quite happy going into the game with that. Did you?
I was actually quite happy with the starting lineup. I think you accept in modern football you have to rotate just because of the sheer amount of games that even a team like Man United's going to have, especially if we look at what we've seen in the previous years. They're having a good League Cup, good FA Cup run. Potentially would like to think we could have a good Europa League run. On top of the 38 games we get from the Premier League, I think rotation is always going to happen. But I don't think that there was any team he could have put out yesterday, so long as every player was in the right position, that could have given them a problem. I really don't. I think even Manchester United, a team that finished 8th in the league, are better than FC Twente. And even if we'd have gone for Harry Maguire, Johnny Evans, shouldn't have been a problem. There's enough experience there to handle anything they basically hit at us. I think the one thing that I wish he would have done is, I heard a term earlier in the season I think it was Roy Keane that was talking about the way Liverpool are trying to play with the more risk, more reward. I just felt that it's evident that we're struggling to score goals consistently, but nothing's changing. I thought that maybe, it might have been worth changing things up a little bit, of providing more of a risk. Maybe starting Bruno Fernandes and Mason Mount as attacking midfielders, putting 2 attacking midfielders and just playing 1 defensive midfielder. And I understand what people would say would get overrun in midfield. I don't think that team's good enough to overrun us in midfield, or there shouldn't have been. But just having more bodies in the final third, more options, and it didn't. But that being said, this is the way that the manager likes to play. I was happy with the starting 11. It shouldn't have been an issue.
No, it shouldn't have been. I mean, what I would say about Mason Mount starting, he has done that, start Mason Mount with Bruno Fernandes, but obviously Mount got injured, didn't he? So I'm assuming that would be, if you were to ask him, if you just go straight up by Eric, what happened there? I'm going to guess he would say, well, we were just trying to give Mount a little bit of time rather than putting him straight in and hoping it would, I suppose, elongate the amount of time that Mason's available for. But before we go into the goals, I'm actually going to go straight into the second part of that, because my issue wasn't necessarily with the rotation. My issue was, just don't listen to him. That was just complete bobbins. Even Paul Scholes got involved with that, and he should know better. Silly sod. But what I thought was really bizarre was when they started to make the substitutions. I don't see a world. There's nothing wrong with bringing on Dillett, nothing wrong with bringing on Mainu, nothing wrong with bringing on Garnacho. I didn't have a problem with that. I don't understand why Marcus Rashford was taken off. Now, we're going to keep getting these words: rotation, trying to look after players, prevention, making sure they're all right. But I would argue that out of those front 3, Marcus Rashford was the one who looked most likely to make something happen. And this isn't the first time he's done it. It's not the first time he's taken off a player who you would argue has looked the most attacking, who has looked the most penetrative. Is that just me that's noticed that? Because that seems a little bit bizarre, that you're an hour into a game, and then you say, let's take off the player that's giving us the most penetration. Did that feel odd to you, Dan? Because I think that's part of where I'm struggling. There's part of me understanding that he wants to look after the players and not have the injuries that we had last season and make sure they're available for every game. But I suppose the flip side of that is that if they're not playing the game and they don't score the goal and we don't win it, it was pointless changing them anyway, because what have we gained out of it? So, I mean, I don't know. What did you think when it came to the substitutions? Because generally, I don't think they've been too bad. But I feel like he's taken off sometimes a player that he shouldn't take off.
Yeah, I think Beanie's touched on this before. They seem to be very set substitutions. He's not actually reacting to the game circumstance or how a player's playing. He's doing a substitution that was pre-planned. And it is becoming a little bit of an issue into if that is the case, I might be wrong. The issue we've got as people that watch the games is there's all sorts of scientific jargon being said on those benches that Rashford's maybe jogged for the last 20 minutes or hasn't hit the sprints that he should be sprinting or heart rates. There's so much in-depth analysis they're looking at when they sub these players. But that's the way it's coming across from being sat at home on the sofa or at the pub watching the game. It's pre-planned. So Rashford was going to come off at that time in this game, irrelevant of how well he was playing, irrelevant of how well we was doing. They don't seem to be reactionary to the game itself, more so, right, we've decided he's going to get 6 minutes today, we're going to take him off. Rashford, for me, was the best player on the pitch by a little bit of a distance, to be honest. I thought he was brilliant. He was skillful, he was running at defenders, he was committing players, he was creating space, and we just weren't using the space. So yeah, for me, it's getting a little bit frustrating, but that's on the basis that these subs are pre-planned or predetermined and not the sports science side of it. And it could very well be the sports science part of it that they're thinking of. Rashford maybe slowed down in them last 20 minutes, so they took him off. We don't know. We'll never know. But on the face of it, it's frustrating because anybody that was watching that game, he was the biggest threat. He was the biggest threat on the pitch. So why would you take him off? It made very little sense at the time. So yeah, it's just a bit frustrating, to be honest, watching.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where I was with it, Daz. It was just frustrating. I saw him come off and I thought, well, Garnacho's great, don't get me wrong, but Hamad's not necessarily getting into the game as much as he usually would. Xerxes not maybe into the game quite as much as he would do. All of the attacks are coming through Rashford. We did obviously do better towards the end of the second half, but a heck of a lot of that was also down to the fact that Twente were quite happy with what they had and were willing to sort of sit back and maybe try and get us on the counter and see if they could do the ultimate smash and grab. But what did you make of the way that Ten Hag changed the team? Like I say, we'll go to the goals and everything that went right and wrong in a minute. But yeah, I just found that interesting. Has that entered into your thinking at all, the way the substitutions are going?
I think in general, his substitutions are going to be the end of his job. Ultimately, I think he's really poor in-game awareness, because I think, just to go back on the Marcus Rashford was Manchester United's best player. So there's two ways to analyse a forward that isn't scoring. One, is he getting quite a few chances, then getting frustrated, then he drops his head? Or is this player staying productive while still missing all of these chances? And I think Xerxes was the player that was getting a few chances. Every time it wasn't, you could see his facial expressions. He was getting frustrated with himself. He wanted to score. But Marcus Rashford, even to the point of when he went off, was continuing to stay productive. And I think Erik ten Hag has misread that entire situation. And actually, Xerxes 100% should have been the one. You only needed to change one of the three because our wingers was looking really productive. Xerxes, for me, was the one that should have come off now. In that situation, he's left with a few options. Do I then bring on Garnacho, put him on the left, and put Marcus Rashford up top, which we have seen quite recently, he can get goals from there? Do we then keep Rashford on the left and just bring on Rasmus Hojlund, who's come back from injury, raring to go? Or do we go to what we tried earlier in the season and bring Mason Mount on and put him up there? Which then comes to the other question, why didn't he see what we all saw? And that was a really poor performance by Bruno Fernandes, who, again, was one of them players that, I mean, I saw, there was a moment, I don't know if you guys noticed it, that something happened with Bruno and he went straight on the floor having his temper tantrum. Mason Mount actually picked him up on the floor and just said, come on, crack on. For me, Mason Mount should have come on for Bruno Fernandes, and I would have been happy whoever he'd have brought on for Xerxes. But 100% Rashford should have stayed on that pitch. Ahmed was just finding he was getting past his man every time. But yeah, I just felt that I think he's scared to bench Bruno, and that's dangerous when you have got another productive attacking midfielder in Mason Mount, and you have got other options. You know, there was even the option for him to say, actually, Xerxes' link-up play was actually quite good. His little 1-2s was actually really good. Do we drop him back just a little bit and play him off, you know, Poland? Try that. You know, will that work? You know, but he just seems to be making the same mistakes over and over again and not learning from them.
I mean, the Fernandez thing, I'm pretty sure was a shot that he had that was close but didn't quite go in. And so he was frustrated with that. I think he missed it and he knew he probably should have done better. But, I mean, again, saying why is he not seeing what we're all seeing? Well, maybe he is. But this is what we're saying. You know, we only see literally what we watch on the telly. There could well be things going on. They could be sitting there and saying Marcus Rashford can only play this amount of minutes. You know, if you want to keep him fit, and like you say, there could be a sports science reason behind it. It could be a physio type thing. It could be a million and one different things. It could be that they've got plans to try and ease people into games, bringing people back from injury. That there's 101 different reasons, but I think my biggest problem with it is that you can't bother looking for the future if you haven't sorted out the present. And that's a bit like me sitting here and saying, you know what, I'm going to save £100 every month because if I do that, that's going to give me lots of money to go on holiday, whilst forgetting the fact that actually you're £6,000 in debt. And so until you can sort that debt out, it's pointless. You know, you're saving the £100, but you ain't going anywhere because it's only ever going to service the debt. And I kind of feel like that's where people are here with this one. You know, it's all very well and good trying to think about the long term, but actually you've got to win the games you're playing because otherwise you're not going to have a long term. This should be the one thing that all managers at United have learned is that actually there's got to be some movement forward, I think. And it's interesting because I was feeling that movement forward, but I just sort of stalled a little bit in this game. It didn't quite seem right. Let's go into something positive because there was a positive. And of course, that was Christian Eriksen scoring what was an absolute banger. I was sat on my sofa, merrily watching it, wondering what was going on. And then I saw Christian Eriksen shift himself inside. And my God, he absolutely unleashed that rocket. And I was like, woo, that's a great goal. And I got a bit excited, did a little dance. I was very happy, very content. It was, Dan, an absolute rocket, wasn't it? That is one of those goals that you just have to stand up and applaud.
It's one of them that if you've played football and you like scoring goals from distance, the way it just rolled perfectly and it just stopped as he hit it meant he could strike it like a dead ball instead of having to run on or judge the weight or anything. It was an amazing strike. Hats off to Eriksen, to be fair, other than obviously the big error later on in the game. He's actually played really well since he's come into the team the last few games. He's looking like a lot of people wanted him gone in the summer. I'd say I was part of that group. I didn't see why we'd need him or how we would use him. But he's done really well in the last few games. He's making a point of he could be used in that in the CM cam role if Fernandez's form is iffy or if he's tied towards the end of games and stuff. But he's producing, and this is the thing. I think there's a moment in the second half where Eriksen was asking, "Is it me? Is it me that's coming off? Like what? I feel like I've played quite well here. Why am I the one being brought off?" And we need that competition, but we've got to understand as fans as well that means that certain players might get swapped out, and it's just the way the future of the club's going to be. But I've been impressed with Eriksen, and honestly, up until the goal, I was impressed with the start. It was a good start. We was in control. We've played like we've played this season. It looked quite well. I don't know how, but we got to half time and then we lost our way. And when I say lost our way, I don't know what happened in the second half. I'm scratching my head 20 minutes in.
Idea, and I think we'll get to that for sure. But Dan is right, isn't it? It was a good first half. We did have opportunities. We could have scored a couple more. There was one which should have been an own goal, really, but the goalkeeper somehow clawed that out from the top corner. We go in 1-0 up, but again, Christian Eriksen, he's almost revitalised, isn't he? And I mean, Christian Eriksen's got a lot of positivity around him. You know, there's Christian Eriksen almost reminds me as one of those players who would quite literally have to turn out to be the worst human being in the world now in order for him not to be pretty much universally liked. You know, the history that goes behind Eriksen and all of the things that have gone before means he is just somebody who people genuinely like to see do well. And he did, didn't he? It was just an absolute, a worldie, really.
I'm quite I'm struggling to analyse it all at the minute, because what we're seeing isn't what we know is there, if that makes sense. A bit like what Dan mentioned just a minute ago, really briefly, about how we looked like we're playing good football, but you look at the results and you can't explain, anything. Can't explain how a team that are creating this many chances and, in midfield is making so many forward passes are just not scoring. It's sort of like it's impossible not to score. And it's hard to analyse any individual player in that, especially in midfield, with like the Eriksen, and it's really hard because on paper, for me, a midfielder's job is to protect. A midfield's job is to protect your defence, but also feed your forwards. Well, we're creating millions of chances, which tells me the midfielders are doing the job. And actually, we've already picked up a few clean sheets this year, which in my head tells me that they're doing the job. And actually, the goals that we're conceding, I mean, Liverpool was a few errors by Casemiro individually. Last night, a lot of people are blaming Harry Maguire for the goal. So actually, not a lot of this is being blamed on our midfield. And so I'm just really, really struggling to analyse it, because no matter what analysis you come up with, it just doesn't make sense, because it would be unfair to say that this team is functioning incredibly well, which I think it is. But we're not scoring and we're not getting the results. And ultimately, football is a results game, So I find it really hard to analyse. Maybe that's just my lack of tactical side of football, not understanding how all them little cogs work individually to produce, to make that big wheel go round. Maybe that's just my lack of knowledge. But I think Christian Eriksen is the one thing that the manager has done right. He's picked up a bit of form and he's sticking with him. But I think, whereas says it's the one thing he's done right, I think he's going to play at the weekend, and I think that will be his downfall, because Christian Eriksen can't play 3 games on the bounce, and your brain tells you he can't. I think he should be there just to support Kobe Mainoo. That is it. I think last night was the one game that you say to yourself, Christian Eriksen needs to play, Kobe Mainoo needs a break, and his experience gets you through a game like that. But yeah, I'm just finding it really hard to analyse all of it, especially with what we're seeing in midfield, because the analysis that you come up with just don't make sense, because we're not winning games.
Well, yeah, no, absolutely. Again, reasonable points, I suppose, on that one. Dan, you just said to me you weren't sure what happened in the second half. And you know what? I kind of knew what was going to happen. We hadn't scored as many goals as we needed to in the first half. And I sat there at half time and I thought to myself, is Eric going to get us to be a bit more cautious second half? Is he going to be going in? Is that his halftime team talk? He's saying, look, we've got a goal, we're ahead. Don't lose it now. You must protect that lead at all costs. Don't take stupid chances. Don't do anything like that. Just, play your football, do all those sorts of things. And at 1-0, I just detest that at halftime. You get to a certain point, like Twente was absolutely going for it throughout that second half. And when they scored the goal, they did carry on trying to have a go. And then their manager went, no, let's go 4-5-1. Let's protect what we've got. And He did that, but with 10, 15 minutes left. So you can sort of understand when you're in that sort of situation, you know what, right, let's try and batten up the hatches and see what we can do because we're getting too close to the end. But 45 minutes, we just saw in the Arsenal-Man City game how difficult that can be to shut a side down for 45 minutes or 55 if you're Man City and be in a situation where you can actually defend that goal and not concede. And Arsenal nearly did it with 10 men, but they didn't, which was hilarious. Now, we are very much in a situation where we tried to do the same thing. We had 11 men, but we did try and defend. And that seems to me, I'm trying to choose my words carefully, it feels a little bit unforgivable because that's not Man United. We shouldn't be at half time against a side that we've never played before in our history defending a 1-0 lead. That's not us. So why did we do it?
It's just one of those things because I don't necessarily think we sort of attacked the defense, but we definitely became more cautious. Like, I know a lot of people don't like stats and stuff like that, but you can see from the attacking momentum, the graphs aren't the same. So in the first half, they're miles high because we had loads of the ball, we was constantly attacking, creating chances, and you can see just after half time, they sort of half and they stay there until Twente go to the 4-5-1, and then we start getting chances again because it's almost as if he decided 1-0 would be enough. A good start in Europe, you'll take it, and then you move on from there. Ultimately, and I put it in the chat yesterday, we lose that game last year, and we didn't lose it this year. So is that a positive? It shouldn't be a positive because we shouldn't be losing games like that. But this time last year, we would have lost that game. We would have lost 2 or 3-1 in the end. So you could argue that that's better than last year. But like I said in the group chat yesterday, we should have got something, or we should have won that game, and we should have found a way of winning that game. I can't remember. It might have been Box. Box put something like, I was expecting Maguire to be an auxiliary striker towards the end. He wasn't, and I have no idea why not, because you're drawing 1-1 against FC Twente at Old Trafford, and all the managers gone by, even Mourinho would be, right, Maguire up top, we'll long ball it, we'll get a knockdown, we'll do something. And it's that knife edge of a manager like Ten Hag. He plays his way, and whether that's the 98th minute of the game or the 5th minute of the game, he wants that brand of football, which is build-up play, the way he wants to play it, and that won't change. He won't panic. And I suppose it's a little bit frustrating, to be honest, because what I want to see from the Man United manager is...
What happened in the end, was it? Because, again, Fernandes was pushing it. Like, even the very last minute, free kick,
But I
think we know that's going to be the last kick of the game. And in Bruno's head, he's gone, I can score. Now, you heard the commentator not 30 seconds before go, this is too far out for someone to have a dig.
Yeah.
As if Fernandes heard that and he said, oh, my beer, give me a second. And
but I think that's a Fernandes issue. I think that's Fernandes trying to push the team.
Players push too hard. They don't stick to what they know can help them to get the lead. They try that a little bit harder. And a lot of that's going to be the pressure that's being put on them by the fans, I would imagine. But equally, they are pushing too hard. And because of that, they're not playing a natural game. They're playing under pressure. And they're buckling under it sometimes.
Well, that was my problem with Fernandes yesterday. Like, I don't buy into this. Fernandes had a really bad game. He didn't. Across all the metrics and stuff, he was still better than 7 or 8 of the players on the pitch. He always will be better than 7 or 8 of the others on the pitch because it's just who he is. However, that said, Bruno Fernandes on the right-hand side is absolutely pointless, and you should not be doing that as a manager. If you're pushing him to the right, just take him off. Just get him off the pitch, stick Anthony on, an actual winger, someone that's going to give you the width that you need or what you're after. Don't put a Bruno Fernandes that's desperate to try and win the game out on the right-hand side chasing shadows, because it wasted the last 10 minutes. And like someone put the free kick at the end, he was always going to shoot from there because that he was trying to drag us to a win. And we sort of didn't need that. But what I mean is the manager didn't go, I think he still had another couple of subs he could have made. So why has he not chucked 2 more forward players on? Why has he not done something different to what we were seeing, which was recycled passing to the wing, and then there weren't really any crosses coming in. It's the first game. I know I had a wobble after the Liverpool game, but it's the first game this season's where I thought, not quite sure what he's doing with his substitutions. But then I think it's a player issue as well as a manager issue. So I don't just think it's down to Ten Hag. Fernandes has got to know he's not having his best game. So, do you know what? Instead of sticking me on the right, maybe it's probably better if I do come off, or we figure something different out. A bit of management on the actual pitch as well would have been nice.
Yeah. But again, this is where we're going with the whole why take Rashford off. You keep Rashford on, you could stick Garnacho out on the right, and then you've got the opportunity, and you've got, again, square pegs, square holes. But instead, we're again shoehorning people into positions just because you can do it doesn't mean you probably should. It's always sensible to show some moderation, I would agree. What for you, Daz, was the problem in that second half? Because it was noticeable. It was a massive drop-off to the point where we just didn't seem to want to go forward. Now, I refuse to believe that there's any football team out there whose sole purpose in their body is we're just going to defend. We won't bother trying to attack. It didn't have the same energy. Is there a bit of actually Twente just did well and they raised their level and we didn't raise ours, so therefore they matched us? Or is it a bit deeper than that?
Before I answer that, I think I always like to cross-reference stuff. So I think it's important to mention when we talk about this game, as you know, with defending and everything, that actually this isn't a team that we play every week. So I always say to people, Europa League football is really hard in the aspect that, if you play in Everton, you can cross-reference 10 games in the past 5 years with Everton. You know how they play. You can cross-reference them to other teams in the Premier League, and you can really prepare for that game. With the Europa League, especially with the new format, we're potentially going to be, you play these once. It's in a league that we don't play any teams against. It's against a team that we've got no history with. So actually, you kind of do a basic scouting report on, what to expect in the game, and you set up accordingly. I think that scouting report came back that there wasn't a team that we needed to worry about. And I stand by that. I don't think there was a team that we needed to worry about. And I think that mentality has been infused into the players. Now, I don't know if that's a coaching issue. I don't know if that's a managerial issue. I don't know if that is a player issue. But that mentality has gone into them players, and they just look casual. I mean, I know we mentioned there was some great performances on the pitch. Rashford was good. Eriksen had a good game. Mazraoui had a good game. But the minute we went 1-0 up, Manchester United sort of did, job done, we'll win 1-0.
This is it.
Job done, we'll win 1-0. And teams know that now.
What Box has put here about Ten Hag's Dutch, maybe we should have known a bit more. He has a massive reputation within Twente. He played for them. He managed them twice. He was there under Steve McLaren as well. Do you think there was a little bit here of whatever happens, my personal pride, I just don't want to lose here? Is there a bit of that? Do you think that was where the nerves was? Because otherwise, I can't see why you're defending against FC Twente. Because like you said, we shouldn't be worried about them. So the only thing that was there was the fact that actually this is Ten Hag's old team and he just wanted the bragging rights. So he was willing to shut up shop a bit earlier.
I'm not sure. I think it's a mentality issue. I genuinely in it all, and I think it's ultimately the manager's going to get the blame for every mistake that happens in the club. Ultimately, and I feel as if even now after the game, and I think this problem has been built up over the past 2.5 years, that after a game, when stuff doesn't go your way, and there's always going to be games. There's going to be games where Man City come away with a really terrible loss, and they're going to kick themselves because they've lost to someone in the bottom six. And that's arguably the best team in the world. But when Erik ten Hag talks to the press, he's always sort of making excuses. No, we constantly hear the stuff like, but we're winning trophies, only Man City have won more than us. And I think instead of being accountable for the rubbish that we've seen in the past 18 months, he's trying to excuse it. And that, sooner or later, that mentality is going to run onto that pitch, or the players are going to lose respect for him because he can't hold himself accountable. And I'm a Man United fan. Obviously, I grew up mainly through the Alex Ferguson times. What we're seeing, performances aside, we're talking mentality alone would not have been acceptable under Alex Ferguson. You know what I mean? And he's allowing this to happen. And I don't get. I'd love to know what happens behind closed doors. I'd love to be a fly on the wall in the dressing room to actually know what he's telling these players, because Manchester United this year look like a coached team, which is something they didn't look like last year, which in itself is a progression. They look like they're a team that are being coached now. I'm not convinced that's on Erik ten Hag. I'm convinced that that's the change in the coaching staff as a whole. I think we've just brought in a better calibre of coaches. Someone like Ruud van Nistelrooy understands the culture of the club, understands what's expected as a Manchester United player. And obviously, from what I can gather, he's running the day-to-day, stuff on the training ground. I think it's a mixture between the players are just too casual and they feel, that we're Manchester United, they're FC20, we don't need to give 100%. But ultimately, I think this is a mentality issue. And whether he likes it or not, the manager's got to take the blame for that. And because it's his job to get rid of that. And
it's interesting you say that, because you're right, the manager will take the blame for it. But you talk about Alex Ferguson, he wasn't coaching the team. He never, he was there, he was around, but he had coaches that came to do it. So we're talking about the caliber of coaches, and I agree with you for that point. That I think the caliber of coaches has risen over the course of the last few months, 100%. But in that respect, Ten Hag's no different to Alex Ferguson, in that he won't be taking the sessions necessarily. He might be overseeing it, but he will leave that to the coaches because that's the coach's job. So if he's managing, this is what I mean. He's going to be taking all of these bits of information. The coaches are telling him this. The medical staff are telling him this. The sports scientists are saying this. Ineos and the people above him are saying they're 2 pennies worth as well. And it's his job to weigh all that up. And where Boxer's put here, do you think people in the club or the coaching staff talk to Ten Hag about these matters? Is he tone deaf to feedback? This is my whole point. I think there's a lot of people that are willing to go in effectively on Ten Hag. And I think there are some points that are quite reasonable. It's not unreasonable to question what's going on with some of the substitutions. It's not unreasonable to question why we're not making the progress in terms of the goals scored, for example. All of those sort of things, I think I tend to agree with. But I do think there is an element of, we say, is it a mentality thing?
I think, though, I've just seen a comment below about how, is he taking the feedback from the coaching staff or is he tone deaf? And this is the bit that don't make sense, because I watch him at Ajax and what he did with that team, and I see a Manchester United manager that can be successful. I see a man that takes criticism from the media and takes it really well. Because I watched a couple of his press conferences when he was manager there, and he takes criticism really well. He's then come to Manchester United, and I don't know if this is him just saying, I'm in charge and I want to insert my authority over the media, my dominance. But from what I can see, he doesn't take criticism very well. Now, the question would be, is if Ruud van Nistelrooy is coming to him and saying, actually, Xerxes shouldn't be starting for X, Y, and Z. We need to be playing these players based on what I'm seeing on the training ground. Is he listening to that? Now, I watched something with Rio Ferdinand quite recently, and Rio Ferdinand said on his live, on his Vibe with 5 channel, that he doesn't believe that Erik ten Hag is listening to his coaches when it comes to how players are performing. He he's seeing what he wants to see, which again is that affecting the mentality. And again, we'll never know. But I just
see. I don't care if he does
I
that,
see,
because ultimately, if it goes wrong, he's the one who gets sacked. Ruben van Nistelrooy is not going to be the one that gets sacked. It'll be Ten Hag. And I always used to say this. I've said many times in these things. I used to be a scout leader, and I was a scout leader. I had an assistant scout leader, and I'd listen to the assistant scout leader. I'd listen to all of the people that were talking to me. But ultimately, it was up to me to make the decision. And I would say to my assistant, "Look, I'm not being funny, but ultimately, if this goes wrong, I've got to take the blame for it. So I've either got to go all in on what you're saying and agree with it. If I don't, if I can't, if there's something about it that I'm not feeling comfortable with, I have to go with my decision." And that's what I did. And he understood that, because ultimately, as he just said, it would be me that, the buck would stop with me. I couldn't sit there and go, "Well, he said that would be a really good idea." Yeah, but you're in charge. And I think that's kind of the situation Ten Hag finds himself in. Just progressing it slightly, because it does stick in with this, Dan. The Eriksen moment. We've spoken a bit about how it felt negative, how he sort of sat back a bit, it hasn't quite worked. But had it not been for a defender managing to effectively Michael Owen our entire attacker midfield, a brilliant challenge from Ugarte, Eriksen had it, and just a lack of awareness of where the players around him were. And this is a guy who's usually so good in possession. He looks, and at the time that he looked, the ball's gone. And at that point, there really wasn't any way back for Manchester United. There was always going to be a goal, because they were straight through onto it. That was an error. So as good as Twente were, and as good as they did open up some chances and do all of those sorts of things, they didn't score until we gifted it to them in a lovely little wrapped bow of joy for them. Is there an element then that actually, if we don't have that mistake, Twente don't score, in which case we're sitting here and talking about a Manchester United side that was capable of defending the single goal lead for 45 minutes? Or do you think that Twente would have just carried on and we probably would have conceded at some point anyway because of the way the game was going?
The way the season's gone is that we've gifted goals, and it's not just this season, it was last season as well. Just want to jump back half an hour to something Daz said about Maguire being at fault and Casemiro being at fault. And this is a problem within the fan base. So Casemiro wasn't at fault for the goals against Liverpool. Yes, he was at fault because he gave the ball away, but he wasn't at fault because giving the ball away shouldn't mean that the team you're facing then has a 4-on-2 attack. That then is coaching, and then it's players maybe in the wrong position, as well as Casemiro getting it wrong. Yesterday, and I'll be honest, I've not seen much of it on social media. Maguire seems to have not been blamed for that goal, which is good and bad. But it was Fernandez's fault, it was Martinez's fault, it was Dallow's fault, it was Rashford's fault. And then Maguire topped it off with schoolboy defending. But his poor tackle meant that Ugarte could get the ball, because he slowed the man down, in essence. At least he was close enough that... And I was saying this on another show. We see Liverpool's defence all the time make mistakes, but it doesn't matter, because the mate helps them out and they get rid of the mistake. And that's what Ugarte did in that moment. He saved 5 players who didn't get the ball and went, there you go, Eriksen, have the ball. And he just went, nah, let's carry on with this mistake. And then it was even compounded even more. I have no idea what Onana was doing with that shot. He's tried to be clever and give himself the angle to go wide, and he shot near post. And that's poor from the goalkeeper to be beat near post at that angle. It shouldn't be happening. So the issue with the season, this season and last season, is our errors are compounded more so than any other team. I watch a lot of football, and we are the worst for making a single mistake and conceding a goal, because it's not just one mistake, it's then 2 and 3 and 4, and then it's a goal. You'll see Brighton will make a mistake, Dunk will miss the ball, and then someone else will come out of nowhere and rescue him, and then the mistake's gone and you forget about it. We've just got to stop doing it, and ultimately it's costing us games. It's a mixture of, it's the worst mixture in football. It's a mixture of your mistakes compounded constantly with conceding goals, and you can't score. And those two things are going to end in defeat, or at best a draw, because you can't keep conceding when you're not scoring goals. I think Xerxes this season's missed 7 big chances. Like, as a footballer and the way he's played, loved it. Linking up the play, good, strong striker. He's got to start scoring these goals, and so's the other players. I think this is the frustrating thing for me, because I don't want to be Ten Hag out, because I still think, if you think the performance yesterday was poor, we still should be winning that game off the first half alone, because we should have been 3-0 up. And that's his tactics, his players, his everything that's got us in a position where we should be scoring 3 goals, and we're not. And then that's on the players, but it's still a mixture of everything. So it's a tough situation. We've just got to, it sounds crazy, really. We've got to stick together with it. And if we keep playing like that, the tide will turn. Eventually it will turn. Whether that's now or in 3 months, it will turn. The issue he's got after yesterday is, I particularly don't see us winning any of the next 3 or 4 games. And then he's got big problems if he can't turn that round. Because if we lose to Spurs and Villa, which is the next 2 Premier League games, we are in massive trouble for the season already. And we'll be 7 or 8 games in. And then, do you sack him? I don't know. I don't want it to come to that already, but that's the situation we're in, because we've had a really poor start to the season. The football's been okay, and we probably should have had more points than we have, but it's been a poor start to the season.
That's what I like about this. It's a lovely, positive show. Again, talking through that goal, I mean, I think Dan is pretty much laid it out pretty fairly. But an additional extension to that I found is, again, and this was something that's been annoying me, I'm actually getting frustrated having Dallo at left back now. Like, I can feel it. I'm a little bit like Mount Etna. It's sort of bubbling, and at some point, I'm just going to blow, because he's not a left back. He's not. He's a very good player, and he offers us so much, but he's not a left back. Just like Toby Collier is not a left back. And we are putting players into this position. Dennis Irwin, I've said this before, made being a right-footed left back look easy. It's not. And every person since then has proven that fact. I reckon you put Gary Neville at left back, he'd have been crap. It's simple, really. We really need somebody left back. And that goal came effectively down that side again, the side where the likes of Diogo Dallo could have been. And what's worse is that he's inverted. So he's not even playing what he should be playing. They've changed the role slightly for him, which you could argue is a good idea tactically, because it might help him out, but it doesn't help us in terms of balance, because that's not what's happening over the other side. So there's got to have that symmetry, I find. I think if you don't have that, you're making so many different caveats that, yes, it does make it difficult for people to play against, but it also makes it really difficult to understand what you're supposed to be doing as well. So when you look at that, when you look at how that game's going, is this part of it, do you think? Because when I start thinking about some of the goals we're conceding, almost all of them are coming from that side. And if I'm an opposition manager, I'm just going to keep going, put it down there. Eventually, he's going to make a mistake. He might knock out 9 out of 10 of them. But that 10th one, we're going to win with.
I think that opposition teams can see. I mean, I said this, I think, on the last slide that we was on. Nobody fears anymore. Nobody fears playing Man United. Man United's a guaranteed point or 3 points, and that is, we've done that to ourselves. And I'm not going to blame Erik Ten Hag on that. This has been spilled in for 10 years. You know, that lack of fear. So I can't put that all on Erik Ten Hag. But people know the way People say we don't have a system and we don't have a style of play. What we do have is a blueprint on how to beat us. And you can see that blueprint, and people are just following that blueprint. And again, that's not always Erik Ten Hag's fault. But what I will say is, Man United couldn't create chances, so we changed the team. Man United's goalkeeper couldn't play out from the back, so we changed the goalkeeper. Man United had 2 centre-backs that wasn't aggressive enough, so we changed the centre-backs. Man United didn't have a wing-back that was as good, so we brought in Mazraoui. It's been fantastic, but it didn't change anything. Man United couldn't score goals. We bring in a few new forwards, develop Garnacho. Guess what? Nothing's changed. The coaching staff wasn't doing well enough, so we changed the coaching staff. Nothing changed. The board, the Glazers are ruining the way we run the football club. Well, we've got new people running now, probably arguably one of the best boards in world football, in my opinion, with the way that the structure is. Time will tell how successful they'll be, but on paper, that is an amazing structure, but nothing has changed except for one person, and that's the manager. I think right now, if we lose that, it's not going to go before the international break. It's 100% not going to go before the international break. But right now, if I'm Manchester United, regardless to how the next 2 games go, I'm interviewing new managers. I'm doing a proper search this time. I'm going to talk to Van Nistelrooy to see if he's capable of, taking the team, even temporarily. I'm actually going to revisit Ole Gunnar Solskjaer and have a conversation of what went wrong in that 3rd year under the team that he had, and with the Glazers. I'm having that conversation because I think there was unfinished business. I'm speaking to Thomas Tuchel. I'm speaking to Thomas Frank. And my mind, if I was the Ineos group, would be to expect that we're not going to get a result from the next 2 games, but know that when we go into the international break, we're interviewing a potential manager to replace him. And I think people keep saying that he's going to get last till Christmas. I followed cycling for years, and I followed David Brailsford for years. And one thing I will tell everybody is an executioner. If he knows that there's an issue, David Brailsford comes in and changes it. Not at Christmas, not in 2 months. He changes it now. So I don't think he'd last till Christmas if we don't get past these next 2 games. But then they've got to look at the next 2 games and say that something's changed. Because if we win both them games 1-0 and we've wasted 10 chances in each game, you could arguably say nothing's changed. We've just got 2 good results. And I think there needs to be a proper analysis of what's actually happening. You know what I would do as a consultant? I'd bring Ralph Ragnick back in, not as a manager, but as a board member, because he was there prior to the Glazer. Prior to the Ineos group. He was the one that came in and said open heart surgery. I think it would be great for him to come in as a director or a consultant and oversee what we're looking at now to see how much has actually changed and have we moved in the right direction. And I think he'd be the perfect man to do that.
Well, what I will say about that is that it's taken a while, Daz. We've enjoyed having you on, but for the first time, I fundamentally disagree with the vast majority of words that have come out of your mouth. And from that, what I mean, to be fair, a little bit with Dan and a little bit with Beanie as well. I'm probably going to be on my own on this one. But as anyone who's on this channel knows, I will fight the good fight until the end. And here we are. This is what I would say about it. Number one, it has changed. Ralph Rangnick spoke about open heart surgery. I mean, we barely had the first bit of it. We've opened up. We haven't completed the surgery. Not by any stretch of imagination. Again, people talk about what's changed. Well, it has. You look at that game against Twente, they had 7 shots. 7. You put that last season, you probably could have put a 2 before that. And definitely a 1. And that wouldn't have been a problem. That would have just been par for the course because of the way that the defence was behaving. The problem is no different to what the problem was at the start of the season. And if we're honest, really not too different from what happened last season. And that problem is we don't have a striker. And I've banged this drum now for me for the last couple of weeks. It's clearly going to be my thing. I think I said it off screen, so I'll say it on the screen now. I don't think we've had a top quality striker, and in this I include Cristiano Ronaldo, since Ibrahimovic. I think if you're looking for a pure finisher, someone who's going to score more often than not, that has been how long it's been since we've actually had a striker that we can rely on to score us goals week in, week out. They've just not been there. Ronaldo was too self-indulgent. It was too much about him. It wasn't about the team. Zlatan, he's very self-indulgent, but he knew how to score and he did it well. And this is the problem. We haven't had them. So you look at what's going on. You look at all of these people. The issue, the football has changed because we've been speaking about it for the last 7 weeks. we've been sitting here saying, you know what, we've been playing some nice stuff. We're playing the ball brilliantly out of the back more often than not. We created, I think, was it 19 shots or 17? Yeah, 19 shots was what we had. Only 5 of them were on target. The problem is just fundamentally our attack is pony. It's been non-existent. We started off at the beginning saying, well, is it just because we're playing these false nines? Is it because we've got Fernandes and Mount and there's not really a striker, there's not really a focal point? But Højlund's coming on and he's not getting that opportunity to be the person that's in the middle that gets to the ball. So we're actually making it even harder for him. So I genuinely think, and I don't know what you think about this, Dan, but I think calling for the manager's head at this point is a madness, because Ineos themselves have said this is going to be 2 to 3 years. This is, they said 3 or 4 transfer windows. This isn't a one transfer window fix. And so, no, it's not. Beanie, no, it's not on Ten Hag who signed Højlund and Zerkzee, because they're young players. They've got to mould them. They've got to work with them. This is the problem. We've bought these young players and people are bringing them on and expecting them to be instant impact. And do you know how rare that is, to bring in youngsters like this that can come in and hit the ground running and cause a difference? You would have to be at like Haaland level, effectively, to be the sort of youngster that's bought and can just come in and have an instant impact. You've got to teach them. You've got to mould them. You've got to get them used to your system. And you will have to do that with youngsters, massively so, because they're naive and they're going to make impulse decisions that probably aren't necessarily the best ones. And they need that ability. And the rest of the team needs to know how to work with them as well. And I think there is such a massive change that's happening. We can see it. But it is, at the moment, a little bit like being attacked by, I don't know, a 6-month-old baby. Like, they've got the power in their jaws to sort of try and clamp them, but ultimately it's just toothless. It's gummy. So there's nothing. You just sit there and go, oh, that's quite funny. And that's about it. And that's our attack at the moment. People just laugh at it because there's not that level of clinicality. I mean, I don't know, Dan. What do you reckon?
You talked me down off a ledge a few weeks ago, to be honest, in terms of this. Like, I was all for, if this is how it's carrying on. The issue you've got is when you start delving into stats beyond this season. So you said that this would have to be a fresh start for Ten Hag, and I did not agree at the time at all. Because once you start delving into, we've won 3 European games in 9. We've won, I think it's 6 in 16 in the Premier League or something like that. When you start adding the stats together, his tenure is becoming untenable because it just looks so bad on paper. But then if you can just sort of cast that out your mind and start from this season, we should have won the majority of the games we've played.
If you start from this season, we're unbeaten in Europe.
But this is what I mean. But in terms of the actual games, we've looked good. We should have won games. We shouldn't have lost to Brighton. We shouldn't have drew at Palace. And when you take just this season on the face of it, it is better than last season. The football's better. The control's better. The chances created are better. The chances conceded are better. The rotation between the squad's better. The issue is we've just got 2 bad things at the same time, which is we keep making mistakes and letting people score, and we cannot score. Like, we can score if we're playing a League 2 team, we can score 7. If we could have just saved 3 of them goals for 2 of the other games, that'd have been fantastic. But that's why I'm saying that as we are now, I wouldn't sack him, because I'm looking at games thinking we created enough to win that. That's not on the tactics. That's on the fact that Højlund's not even back yet, really. He's had 2 10-minute run-outs where he's not really going to affect the game. Xerxes still getting into the swing of things. Him and Rashford look like they're going to link up quite well. So they look good when they've played together. I'm convinced that he doesn't know his best team yet. And then once he knows his best team, I think he'll start to stick to that 11 and rotate a few. Yeah, that would be nice. So I'm not overly sort of like he needs to go now. I just fear for him, because if he doesn't pick up a result against Spurs, if we then go and lose to Porto, who, by the way, lost their first game 3-2 against 10 men for the last 40 minutes. So we should be beating them. And then we then lose to Villa. I think it is untenable, because you do have to look at the results prior to this season. And yes, we have won the FA Cup, and yes, we won the League Cup. But this is why most fans have given him the stay of execution, because he's won trophies without playing the best football in the world. So for me, I would keep him and give him a little bit longer, as long as the football stays the same. Because I genuinely believe this. I'm not just saying it to be upbeat. If we keep playing the way we're playing and controlling the games we've been controlling them, possession, territory, etc., but we start to take our chances, we'll start to win 2 and 3-0, and it will start to be comfortable. We've just got to cut out those. It's not even cutting out the errors. You just got to hope that your mate fixes it, and then your next mate don't just then make another error. That's what we need, and we'll get there eventually. It will turn. It's just whether we give him enough time to let it turn.
It's interesting. We do get some people that say some pretty mad thing. I mean, Twilumber, I let a lot of things go, but you need to learn to listen, pal. Cause you've completely taken what I said. You would be superb working for the Sun, because what you've done there is taken what I said and twisted it around entirely. You said third season, can't get a proper playing style because we've got kids. I never said that. What I said was you can't expect young players. Like, everybody sits at that and goes, you can't win anything with kids. We know that we can because we did it. What people forget is those kids were playing football together for ages before we put them into that team. We didn't just find 7 random players from all across Manchester and go, come here, and then throw them into the team. They played together. They knew each other. They knew each other's games. They were friends with each other already. So moving them into the team was a madness. Under no circumstances did I say we can't get a proper playing style. We've got one. We're playing it. What I'm telling you is you can't take a Xerxes, first time in the Premier League, first time playing and all this, and expect him. Expect is the word that I'm using, to be a world beater. It happens sometimes. Of course it does. But you can't expect it. Mainu's settled in, but he's used to the football. He's been playing in this country all his life. So you start bringing in these players, they're going to do that. And the other thing here, it's fundamentally untrue. There's such cliched shite that people come out. It's a result business, though. How long can we let it go for? We'll be in a relegation battle. No, we flipping won't. What you're saying there when you tell me it's a results business is that 19 other managers should be sacked because they didn't win the title. And the problem, and I'll say it time and again, and it's one of the reasons why sometimes I wonder why I'm on this channel. The problem sometimes is the fans, because they're just too entitled. I've said it 1,000,001 times, and you see it on Twitter. And yes, Mr. Musk, I am going to call it Twitter. Stop whinging about it. It's never going to be X. People need to understand that we are aiming. I mean, I can't remember who it was I was speaking to, but I put on there. The problem now is that actually the level is so high of expectation, we can't get to it, because we would have to be ridiculously good. People just absolutely, like Daz was saying it earlier, Alex Ferguson, this is what he did. When it was Fergie, it was this. Ferguson, I'm not being funny. That's like comparing God and a tiny little worm. Like, they're just a very, very, very different creatures and very, very, very different things. Alex Ferguson was just a one-off, a special person that came in at the right time. It was the right club, and he had so much about him. He set up a football team, and it will never be emulated. It never will, because the way football's gone now, you're never going to get a man who comes in, takes the whole squad, takes the whole club over, runs it from top to bottom, sets up the academy, sets up everything that's going. It's never going to happen, because people keep saying we need a director of football. Do we? No, we don't. I argued for ages you just need another person like Ferguson who knows football and understands what to do. Everyone's like, no, the jobs are too big. It's too big. People have got to split up a bit. Some people have got to look after the transfers. Someone's got to look after that. Someone's got to. The minute you do that, you ever had the phrase, too many fingers in the pies? That's what's going on. You've got too many people with a vested interest in their job and thinking they're the important one. And the manager just has to sit there and be like a nodding dog and try and please all of those people, because otherwise he's out of the football club. And that, boys and girls, in a nutshell, is why football is absolutely buggered. Because it's never going to work. You take that to your under 7s, under 8s. Who's in charge of your football team? Your manager. That's it. There's nobody sitting there telling you you've got to do this, that, or the other. And that's why people tend to do well. When you go lower down, you don't have all of these massive structures. It's just managers. And that's why they end up getting what they get. And then they go into these places where it's full of, it's just like a dichotomy of life. You just look at it and go, oh, there you are. Look. It's all these people that are earning masses of money, and really they do bugger all. They do nothing. person that knows about the football is the manager. But they've got to say yes to too many people. It's why I hate men's football. I really do. I can't stand it. I would happily go and sit and just watch the women's game where it's not a drama. Don't even talk to me about XG bucks. You know what will happen when that happens. The internet will flip and explode and that'll be game over. But just genuinely, it blows my mind. And I just wish more people could just sit back, take a moment and recognise that when we're talking about football, we're never going to reach the levels that Man United were at. We're going to win a league at some point because it works in cycles. But look at Arsenal. The work that they were having with Arteta, they've not won anything yet. But so many of them are behind him. But now they're getting to that point, 4 or 5 years in, if we don't start winning the league, then there's going to be a problem for Arteta. And I understand that because there does have to be a shelf life. But they've seen a progression in the way that he's playing. And he has run Manchester City closer, I would argue, than any other team over the last few years. And I include Liverpool in that, even though they did win one. So I just kind of feel that on this respect, people just need to calm down a bit. We're not going to win the league this year. I know I said that we would, and I'm sorry if I set you off on that thinking. If when I said that Man City were going to get relegated this season, we were going to nick it because we'd finish second, I lied. I just like to start optimistically. Genuinely, if we finish top 4, I'd be quite content. But I don't know. Go on, Daz. You wanted to say something, so I'll let you finish off.
Obviously, when Dan was talking about, I mean, I 100% agree. The only game we've not won this season, and I'm going to include the Community Shield in this, that we didn't deserve to win was the Liverpool game. Manchester United could easily be second in the league, cruising, creating just as many chances as Arsenal and Man City, because we are creating them. We are picking up a few clean sheets. I think a lot of people are emphasising on the individual errors at our club, not realising that Liverpool, Arsenal, Man City are all making errors as well. It's just they're getting results, so it's all is forgiven, and they don't necessarily lead to a goal. I do believe that if we start scoring goals, top 4 is an achievable target based on the fact that the only game that we've lost this year that we deserve to lose, what we didn't deserve to win, was the Liverpool game. We could easily be sat here having won every single game. For me, I think the difference between tipping them scales is the manager, in the same way that the difference between Arsenal taking Man City within a point 2 years in a row, when I think they've been the better team and I think they've played better football, but Man City have always just pipping them. I think the difference is one team's got an elite level coach and one's got a very good coach. I think that was the same with Klopp. I think Klopp gets loads of credit for what he did at Liverpool. I think the difference between him winning 1 title and 5 was the fact that he wasn't an elite level coach. I think if he was an elite level coach, he would have got more titles, in the same way that Alex Ferguson won the league with the team that he retired with. For me, I don't think Erik ten Hag is the man to get that extra 10% out of this team. I genuinely don't see it based on what I've seen. And I'm gonna go back one manager, sort of, to give a comparison. Go back to Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. This is a man, just to remind people as well, before they say you never won anything. This is a man that had Fred McTominay in the heart of his midfield and Harry Maguire and Lindelof holding the fort in defence, and he had a right winger who was actually a centre forward and who was only 17 at the time. Should never have been great player, Greenwood, but should never have been starting that early in his career as a permanent option. Never. And obviously we didn't really have a stable centre forward. But Ole Gunnar Solskjaer managed to score more goals in an individual season than Alex Ferguson ever did. And he did it consistently over 2.5 years. He achieved more clean sheets over a 2.5 year period before it started to fall apart than Alex Ferguson ever did in a 2.5 year period. So he can score goals. He can stop goals going in. He never, ever failed to finish in the top 4. And he never finished below a semi-final in any cup that he competed in. And he did that with that team, he did that without a technical director of football, without a board, basically, and I did it under the Glazers, while Ed Woodward was making transfers that he wanted, that sold shirts, not what Ollie wanted. You fast forward that, people say going back, I think if we was to bring Ole Gunnar Solskjaer in, I think we'd start scoring goals again, and I think we'll start to see what we saw before. And I think the difference this time for Ollie, and I think it wouldn't unravel, and I think that's because the culture in the club is better than it was. I think we've got a board that is running the club in a competent way. And I look at Ollie, and I don't see Ollie as an elite manager, but I see him as a manager that can get an extra 10% out of that team. I can't say the same for Erik ten Hag. And that's why I feel that we just need to cut our ties and just say he's not the wrong man. He's had 2 trophies in 2 years for a team that couldn't win it in 6 years prior. He deserves some praise for that, and he deserves a lot of praise for, operating in that open heart surgery and being part of this, new stage for United. But I just feel he's a stepping stone to another manager that can get us closer to Man City.
It's interesting. I mean, I hope to God Ollie doesn't come back, because I can't watch another one of those exit interviews, if I'm honest with you. Like, we broke the poor bloke. And if I was him, I'd tell us to take a long walk off a short bridge. But again, with this one, they said we need structure. Yeah, we got it now. We absolutely do. We've got the structure. But what you're failing to forget, Tulumba, is I don't know what it is, but I think you're one of those people who's got Amazon delivery, but you've got Amazon Prime, so it comes next day. And you're not like some of us normal people here. You might have 2 or 3 weeks to wait when you click the button. Or you're just used to it coming like that. And it doesn't. Like, if you sort out a structure, that's great. It takes years to build. I'll remind people again, it took Manchester United 26 years to win the league title. And anyone who is sitting there just thinking that this is just going to be a doddle, and if you just change the manager, eventually it's going to change. We've changed managers 5, 6, 7 times, and it ain't bloody worked. And you all sit there and go, just change the manager, that'll make a difference. And you've never been right. Nobody's been right since Fergie. Just to point out what I was saying about the forwards, you look at last year, Højlund scored 16, Fernandes scored 15. McTominay was our next top scorer with 10, with Garnacho as well scoring 10. Beyond that, Rashford had 8. Your other 2 strikers, Ahmad and Martial, both got 2. Anthony scored 3, which is the exact same amount as Diogo Dalot, not a forward. And this is the problem. Like, we scored a few goals there, but you look at that, even if you take the top 4 scorers there with their 16, 15, 10 and 10, you're looking at 51 goals there. And that's the equivalent, really, over the course of a whole season, of scoring 1 goal in a game. That's not enough. If you really want to be winning titles and doing things like that, you need to have players that are going to get you closer to 100, 130 goals over the course of a whole season, not just in the league, but across very many other situations. I'll tell you where it went wrong. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, what he should have had was when he said to them, let's buy Haaland, if they'd have just done it, we'd have that striker, wouldn't we? And genuinely, I do think Manchester United would have won the league under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, because he had it all built up. He just didn't have that finisher, and we would have had it. So there. Andy's just said get Southgate in, which I'm sure is just another way of him trying to entice me into a fight. But I'll just say this. I look at this list that Box put up earlier. Southgate, don't want him. Van Nistelrooy, he's not done anything as a coach yet that would lead us to go, that man is ready for Manchester United. People absolutely crucified Ole Gunnar Solskjaer in the end. The same thing will happen to Van Nistelrooy if it doesn't work. So no thank you. Thomas Tuchel, rubbish. McKenna, good, but still needs more time. De Zerbi, no thanks. Frank, no thanks. Nagelsmann, no thanks. Pochettino, no thanks. Potter, no thanks. Silva, no. Gold, Amorim, Zidane. And there's not a name on that list that you can convince me is definitely better than Erik ten Hag.
I think there's only one manager for me that in the summer is potentially available. I think could be attractive to the United job just because he'd want it on his CV that ticks every single box, and that's the Don, Carlos Ancelotti. I've got a feeling he's leaving Real Madrid in the summer, and I feel that regardless who's going there, I always had a feeling that maybe he'd find his way back to Everton. I know that sounds really daft. I just thought that he's done what he's wanted to do with Real Madrid. Imagine on his final CV that he's the first manager post Alex Ferguson to win a title. And I think this is ultimately why Man United have attracted whatever manager they've really wanted over the years. Because
that's right up there with Imagine if Barry was king.
I think if a new manager came in and won the title, that would be arguably the biggest, it'd be considered the biggest achievement in football post Alex Ferguson, because of how hard it's been to do it with the money we've had, the managers we've had. And I think Carlos Ancelotti would thrive at the job, and he is attracted to the Premier League because he took the Everton job. I think the only reason he left the Everton job is because Real Madrid wanted him. I don't think he'd have left there for any other club. So I think he would fancy the Premier League, and he just ticks every single box for me.
I've got to jump in. I've got to jump in.
Andy Cole back up at Van Nistelrooy up front.
You don't genuinely believe that Klopp wasn't an elite coach, surely?
Me or Daz?
Daz.
Oh, what was that? Sorry.
You don't genuinely believe that Klopp wasn't an elite coach?
I'm a results man. I believe in results, and I think that results. And I'm going to say this, and if we've got any Liverpool fans in here, I'm happy for him to, debate me on this. I think he took over a team that Brendan Rodgers nearly won the league with, and should have won the league had it not have been for Steven Gerrard's infamous slip. Granted, he lost Suarez and Steven Gerrard in the transition, which are considered two irreplaceable players. I will acknowledge, they're both arguably one of the best players in their position we've ever seen. Not the best, but I'll recognise that. He was given more than enough time to rebuild that team. He was given the most expensive most expensive goalkeeper in the world at the time. He was given the most expensive defender at the time. He was pretty much given what he wanted. If he said, I wanted to release this player or give that player an extension, he got what he wanted. He did get what he wanted out of that team. I feel as if he won one league title. Granted, he won he got 2 Champions League finals as well. But what's the point of counting finals if you don't win them? I just don't feel. I feel he had the best team in the world for 100% 4 years, 100% for a 4-year period. I think he had the best team in the world, and he won 1 league title, which, let me remind people, that was a COVID title where there was no fans, and it was a bit of a grimy place, and the fans do, influence football somewhat, and I just feel as if that's his legacy, What 2 Champions League finals, winning one of them, and a league and a Premier League. Yeah, he went 90 points on 2 occasions, but again, nobody cares if you're not winning it. Nobody cares, and I just feel as if I don't think he was that. When I say this to everyone, world class and elite is thrown around too much. When I look at an elite manager, I'm looking at someone like Carlos Ancelotti that's got the trophy cabinet to back up what he's saying. Someone like Alex Ferguson, someone like Shanks, someone like Matt Busby, someone that's got the pedigree to say, this is why I'm an elite level manager. I think people below that was extremely good managers, but I don't think there was elite level. And I think the same principle needs to apply for players. People say, but this player's world class, but that's world class. Okay, so if Saliba's world class, for example, is he at the same level as Rio Ferdinand, John Terry, Sergio Ramos? The answer would be no. So the answer is he world class? No, he's just extremely good. And I think the same, the principle does apply. I don't think Klopp was an elite level manager. I think he was a very, very good manager that has selected the team that he takes every single time with intelligence. I think he's an amazing man manager. I mean, I will go as far out, and I know Barry might disagree with this, that I think he was a better player manager than Alex Ferguson. I think he could manage his players better than any manager that I've ever seen. And I think, I respect him loads for that. But
Can I just
don't
say,
think...
You had a go at Klopp, and I never thought I'd see the day when I'd say this, but you had a go at Klopp because the only title he won was the COVID season. But Ole Gunnar Solskjaer finished second during a bit of a COVID drama as well. And we've just gone on we've waxed lyrical about how good Ole is. What's the difference?
He also set a record of 29 away undefeated in the COVID seasons. I just find it crazy that people don't rate. This is going to go all for LFC at this rate. Don't rate Klopp as an elite manager.
The end.
No, I get what you're saying. It's just my way of having a dig at Liverpool fans. But it's only one title, and I see a team that was the best team in the world for 4 years.
But without Pep and Man City,
the fact they've only won one, absolutely irrelevant what season it was, he should have won more than he did. That's an absolute...
Well, without Pep and the alleged 115, Klopp is looking at one of the best Premier League era of trophies you've ever seen, with Champions Leagues included. So he's been robbed of his own legacy, which is why he's left the Premier League, because of Man City and what they're doing to the Premier League. And the reason why I asked that question, because it brings it back to Manchester United. As it stands, the state of football that it's going to, Man United are going to struggle to catch up with Man City, even if they got every single thing right, like Liverpool did for the last decade. And they still could only get one title, like Arsenal has for the last 4 or 5 years, and they can't even get a title.
But you ask yourself, what's the big difference in that? Why couldn't Liverpool do it? Why won't Arsenal do it? And I'm going to say it's an elite level manager. There's only one other elite level manager in world football.
If you gave Klopp, because the Ancelotti thing's crazy as well. If you gave Klopp the money that Pep Guardiola's had, then Klopp would have won everything, because he would have bought.
You gave me the money that Pep Guardiola's had. I reckon I could do it.
No, but this is what I'm saying. It's not a level of manager. It's the fact that they can have whatever he wants. And I've said this about Pep from day one. They bought a left back, it didn't work. They paid 45 million for a left back that didn't work. Immediately within 6 months, they paid another 40 for a new left back. They did it again with centre backs. They paid 60 million for centre back, didn't work. Bought another one for 60, didn't work. Bought another one for 75. They brought a goalkeeper in Bravo, didn't work. Bought Edison in straight away. Pep's only successful because if a player doesn't work in a position, they can be just gone. And this is what Man United have struggled with for 10 years. If they didn't spend wisely, they couldn't spend again. Liverpool are the same. They was buying Andy Robertson from Hull City and turning him into one of the best left backs in the world because they had no other choice. They couldn't spend the money to do it.
The same principle to Jose Mourinho when he took over Man United. At the time of when he took over Man United, he was considered one of the top 3 managers in world football, and 100% of that period in his career, he was considered better than Klopp. He spent more money than any other Premier League team, including Man City at the time, and couldn't get better than second. So actually, being an elite level manager and actually having all of that money doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be successful. It's impossible to sit here and say if Liverpool
no one's going to beat City.
X, Y, and Z, because actually Klopp has spent money really poorly. Darwin Núñez being a perfect example. How do you know he wouldn't have brought in 5 more Darwin Núñez's in different positions, players that fail? I think he's just been really fortunate, but people need to remember it wasn't Klopp signing these players, it was Kieran Maguire.
Oh, no, that's cop out. It's typical cop. We're going down LFC. So what you're doing there is you're giving credit to the man above Klopp instead of the credit to Klopp, and then you've done it with Ten Hag early. You've taken the credit away from Ten Hag and give it to Van Nistelrooy instead of saying, well, what if Van Nistelrooy was the one to say start Xerxes and Ten Hag listened? So you're just pushing out
it's not all Anthony Joshua Dubois.
It's what suits the agenda at the time. You can't if you're giving credit, you're giving credit. If the book stops with that person, it stops with that person. Klopp had Liverpool running as title challengers to Man City, who are a financial doping team, and Arsenal have got the same problem. So let's say that Man United sort themselves out. In 4 years' time, we are not going to be able to challenge Man City if nothing comes of these charges, because it's irrelevant of what you do. Man City are set. So if Pep stays there and he keeps getting the personnel he needs constantly, and they get away with these 115 charges, that is Premier League. 129. But
I'll be off last time.
But you mentioned about how Pep, you know, he had a play and it didn't work. Don't matter what he played for him, he'd just pick another one. That's the signs of an elite level manager. Meanwhile, we're sat here having paid what, £90 million for Anthony or £70 million, you know, and actually we've still not replaced him. We're having to use an academy player. Why? Because nobody in that club has got the minerals
question
to
for
say.
you then, guys. Quick question: do you think, because Ten Hag has said I want Anthony, do you think that Ten Hag signed off on that being an £80 million transaction, or do you think that Ten Hag's just asked for it and the people around him have gone off and just paid whatever it costs to go and get him? Did he just say, this is my top one, and then they've gone off and paid the money? Because I'm intrigued, because to me, that does make a bit of a difference. If Ten Hag has sat there and said, yeah, 80 million for Anthony, and he's turned out like he has, then I can see people having a dig at him. But if he's just gone, Anthony would be the player that I would want the most where I am at this point in my career, just coming in, I think he could be a good attacker that would help us out. And then the people around him have gone, yeah, let's go and spend 80 million on him. Who's made that decision? Is it Ten Hag or is it somebody else? Because I would argue if that's other people, they're the ones the buck should stop with, not Ten Hag, because he's just asked for a player. We didn't ask for it to blow an entire budget.
Is that to ban? Oh.
No, for you. You like, we were talking about Anthony there and the money, but I'm just intrigued as to who's green lighting that amount of money. Does he have a say in that? Does he have to say, yeah, it's 8 million?
I would love to know. I'd love to know who's making the decisions on what players are worth. I think, well, just using Anthony as as an example, I think at some point a conversation would have been had where he would have said to Manchester United board, I want Anthony, is the player that can run my wing the way I want it to run. And all fairness to him, if he thought he was the man that could do what he wanted him to do, having managed him, you've got to respect the manager's decision for making that. Was a conversation had where Manchester United have then said, we spoke to Ajax, but it's going to cost us £70 million to get him. Do you still want him? And the manager has said, or we can get XYZ for 50 million, which is what we'd ideally like to pay. And as the manager said, that's my only player that I want. You know what I mean? And again, I'm not going to criticise him for that decision, because I think every manager, including Alex Ferguson, have said over the years that I want this certain player that brought him in and it hasn't worked. You know, every manager's allowed a player that doesn't work. I think for me, when you look at that Manchester United team, you take away Lisandro Martinez, how many of his signings that fit his Dutch criteria have been successful? I don't think any of them have. I don't think any of them have worked other than Lisandro Martinez. So actually, instead of having one that doesn't work, he's actually had one that does work.
Interesting. Very interesting.
I mean, because Mazraoui doesn't fit his profile. I know Mateus Delic did, but you could argue that actually he doesn't, because he isn't young, he isn't raw. He's actually gone on and built a pedigree, post Ajax. You look at these players, and actually the ones that he's brought in, the only one that you can say has 100% his worked has been Lisandro Martinez, and I don't think that that's good enough. And I think the manager has picked his players this time round because they do meet his Dutch criteria.
I've got no doubt.
Having worked with them in the past.
I'm just intrigued about the money side of it. If he has to sign off on that, or if the other people are making that decision. But yeah,
well, it'll be the other people now because of PSR. We can't afford. So that's the whole problem with football now. 89% of the clubs in the Premier League cannot do what City and Chelsea are doing in terms of. So if Pep gets it wrong, it does not matter. They'll figure out a way. They'll sponsor a cheer for allegedly. They'll sponsor a cheer for 500 million, and then they've got a new left back. If Man United, if Anthony hasn't worked, we can't get rid of him because we're going to fail PSR if we do. And then the only way of counteracting that is selling the likes of McTominay to Napoli, getting rid of thou who shall not be named to Marseille, because it's all profit and it means that we don't fail PSR. Well, and this is what I'm saying. It's going to take ultimately years and years and years until we're anywhere near Man City. And even then, if nothing comes of these charges for Man City, nobody's catching them, so it won't matter. So what I'm trying to say is you give you either give Ten Hag a chance or you sack him, and we're having the same conversation in 2 years because the new manager is going to have the same problem. He's then not going to be able to rotate his squad because of PSR. He's going to have to play the players that he doesn't want for a bit until we get through the transfer windows. And then everyone will go, I've had enough now. And this is what happens. This is why I'm so not wanting to pull the trigger on Ten Hag, because of what happened to Solskjaer. Solskjaer should have stayed. He was the guy that we should have gone. We've just been battered by Watford. We're going to back him. We're going to let him drop Ronaldo. We're going to get him a DM instead of what he didn't ask for. Because of the football we was playing, it was there. And now this is what I'm saying. I'm starting to see sprouts of that football this season to the point where you can say, could we back him now instead of sacking him? Because otherwise we're going to be here again in 12 months under Southgate. And it's a no from me. It's a no thanks.
And I think what we need to hang on.
Though,
So just to say what you're saying there about the play there, Dan. This feeds into why Jason Wilcox was brought into it as well. You know, it was all just up in the air. You did what you wanted. The manager made the decisions. All of that was going on. It was all higgledy-piggledy. I think by getting Wilcox in, what that's done is you've now got a direction of travel. Everyone knows what way they're going. And so therefore they're working together. And the fact that Ineos came in, watched, spent all that time watching, they've obviously noticed that wasn't there. So they put that into position. They put that into place. And so, you know, you can argue, like you just said, that is making a difference in terms of going forward. Go on, Daz.
No, I think that's why, you know, based on what you've mentioned. I mean, we mentioned Ronaldo coming in at Man United. I think that didn't work for Solskjaer because he wasn't the biggest man in the room. Ultimately, Ronaldo is. No matter what room he walks into, he's the biggest man in the room. And I think Pep Guardiola has that at Man City. He is, without a shadow of a doubt, the biggest man in the room. And it doesn't matter who he brings into that dressing room, he is going to be the biggest man in that room. The problem with Ten Hag is he isn't the biggest man in that dressing room at Manchester United, because even someone like Rashford's bigger than him. I think even Alex Ferguson, over the course of his career, Alex Ferguson, if he ever felt he wasn't the biggest man in that room, I'll use two examples, and they're both number 7s, George Best and David Beckham. He let them go. It was irrelevant. He was the biggest man in the room, and he was in charge. And I think there's only one man in football that ticks that box other than Pep Guardiola, and that's Carlos Ancelotti. Why? Because he's achieved more than every manager in world football, maybe other than Pep Guardiola. So he's always going to be the biggest man in that room based on
my issue with that.
But Mourinho was the biggest man in the room.
Yeah.
And his football was so dire that if I needed to get to sleep at night, that is what I would watch. Like if I was having a bit of trouble, that's what I would do. Mourinho's football was quite simply only worse than Van Gaal's, marginally. Those 4 years as a Manchester United fan nearly switched me off of football entirely because it was quite frankly the worst football ever. It was dire. It was horrific. It was only at that point that you start to understand what it must have been like to have been a Burnley fan. It was horrible. And people keep talking about these reputations. Mourinho came in, like you just said, he only finished second. The problem is everyone gets het up on it. Twilumber's on it. He loves it, you know, and I know he'll take this the right way, but he does. It's all about who's the player, who's the big one. Let's get the big names in. They're the same when they're talking about the players. Let's get the big players in. This is the problem. everybody wants. Yes, the Rangnick era was depressing, but we all knew it was only going to be for a few months. And that man should be nowhere near this football club ever again because he was pony. But the whole point of it is that people keep on wanting the marquee signing, the biggest, the best. And actually, that's not necessarily what it takes. You look at United winning their first title, he was building up the players that he wanted. He put players into the positions that he wanted. He had Bruce, he had Pallister, he was trying to get rid of the likes of Paul McGrath, who he liked, but had a bit of a drinking problem. So he wanted to instill the right values. Then he started to look at the youth and seeing what the youth was doing. And he started putting these players into position. He had people like Neil Webb, he had people like Clayton Blackmore, he had Mark Hughes up top. And all of a sudden, Paul Parker at right back, Dennis Irwin at left back. And you start looking at these players and you think, okay, what's missing? What do we need? And the just one or two. But the thing that flicked it for us was Eric Cantona. Now, Eric Cantona had gone big at that time. It does only take one signing. You look at Solskjaer, his signing was Fernandes. The minute he signed him, there was a flick. And it really started to change that upward trajectory. And I think it's the same thing now. You just need that striker. You just need that signing that's going to do it. And I'll keep on saying it. When we get that person who's up front, who's actually going to be the person that we can rely on to be the one that scores us 20 goals a season regularly, we're going to go on to win things.
Or even if one of the lads step up and start scoring goals. My question for the Ancelotti thing would be, if these players can't cope with the strictness of Ten Hag, they're never going to cope with the strictness of Ancelotti. And then Ancelotti's going to find himself in the same position that Ten Hag's in now. You're not going to be able to get rid of Rashford or Anthony if they're misbehaving or if they're not following your ways, because we cannot afford to do it. We will fail PSR.
I feel, though, that for the first time post Alex Ferguson, in fact, I'd probably say for the first time in 20, 30 years at Man United, that we have a really good base. And with what Ineos have created this year, we've got a really good base. So I think it was unfair to look, I do say it was unfair to look back at the previous managers, including David Moyes, because it can't be easy working under Ineos with, you know, a rope that's on its last thread and they're not going to help, you know, strengthen it. Whereas I think now everything is there. I do believe we've got a really good group of players. I do think we've got a good group of players, you know, a good mix between experienced players, players that are just coming into the prime, as really young players coming through the academy, as well as some of the young players like Ganasho, Ahmed, that are part of that team. I just feel as if now that we just need the right man to steer that ship. And I mean, if you take away the League Cup and the FA Cup, and I know that's, you know, it's impossible to do in football, I would say in my lifetime, taking to mind I've only seen Alex Ferguson and then the post managers, I think Ten Hag's been the worst manager I've ever seen at Man United.
Whoa, say that
Even
again.
worse than Ralph Rangnick, because although Ralph Rangnick was in a really tough position in the time, that at least he was self-aware that he told the whole world what the problem was at Man United. He identified the problem that we can now, that, you know, we've now gone on to potentially fix beyond the pitch, you know. And for that, I think that, you know, you look at all of the other managers, I think, and I mean, Louis van Gaal's football was dire. I mean, I used to fall asleep watching Man United play under him, but I still think he was better than Erik ten Hag. But again, the managers had that massive handicap of working with the Glazers. Ten Hag hasn't had that handicap this year. Yes, he had it in his first year, and he obviously did really well that year. He then had his second year, and I defended him from start to finish just based on the injuries alone. You know, I thought he's still getting to the finals of trophies. He's still, you know, he's got loads of injuries, but coming into this year, and I respect what we've said about how the football is better. But like Beanie mentioned below, it is a results game and he isn't getting the results. And at some point, you have to say to ourselves, this just isn't going to turn around, because actually, in 2 games' time, if we go into that international break having lost 2 more games, although it's hard to say, you know, when you've played less than 10 games, but top 4 is gone. It's gone. Unless we come back from international break and have an absolute blinder, which I don't think we'll do, because there's no indication that we're capable of that. You know what I mean? I think 2 more games and we're in a position where we're really worrying. And to be able to say that, you know, after all of the money, the right investment, the right structure, everything, you know, a better ownership model, to then say that he's 2 games away from everybody saying that he could lose his job.
Not everybody.
Surely that means at this stage, you know, he's actually the wrong person. And I think that when I talk back to the mentality, I think all them players know what we know, that Manchester United tried to replace him in the summer. Them players know that.
You know that. I'd love to see where that's actually been put into print, because I don't. I think that was.
You know, and again, I think that mentality within that toxic side of it, you know, that them players know that we spoke to Kieran McKenna, we spoke to Thomas Tuchel. If you're happy with your manager, you don't talk to these people. I mean, there's rumours coming out today.
Throw that to the other side. If they're talking to these managers, why aren't they in place? And now we want them in place now. They clearly weren't good enough. So why do we want them now? Because if they were good enough, they'd have been in at the end of last season. Why aren't they in now? Exactly.
No, I know that, but I just feel as if the players only know, in a lot of ways, what we know, because I think the players are shielded from a lot of, you know, like we hear stuff in the media and you never really know what's happening behind closed doors. I think that some subjects and some cases, the players are in the same position we're in. They only know what they read in the media. They don't really know what's happening behind them other doors that they don't have access to. And I think that they've seen that we've got a manager that the board isn't happy with, that we have tried to replace him. Managers have actively come out and said, we spoke to Manchester United, you know, and, you know, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's now coming out today saying that he'd love to come back to Man United. And I know that doesn't mean Man United speaking to him, but, you know what I mean? It's just, I just think it's creating a toxic environment. And I think once that's there, the manager's time is done. You're never going to get that back. You're never going to get that.
The toxic environment. It's the fans.
The fans and the media.
But there we are. But I've had this argument a million times, and the answer to your question, which you put there as a complete and utter gag, is yes. I've said this since day one. The reason we are in the absolute crap hole we are in now is this.
8-year contract.
Don't sign a manager, giving him a 7-year contract, telling him he's got this project that he's going to build, and then sack him after 7 months. The minute we did that, we went into, and this is where all of you get your dietary requirements from now. This whole, it's a results business, this. Because
so what happens then?
Years, and this.
So what happens then? Just conversation. So what happens if as a board, they agree with you, and I know they'll agree with a lot of United fans, especially the older generation, that say that actually let's just give him as long as he needs. And we get to 7-year period, and we actually, because it's looking as if we're going to go 2 years without Champions League football now. It doesn't look as if we're going to challenge for Europa next year. So we could actually be in the Europa Conference next year. We've just reported a massive debt, and we know that we're on the fine line with FFP spending anyway.
That debt's been there for a decade.
If we get to the 7-year period where we're floating at 6th, 7th position, we've done what Liverpool sort of did, and that's found themselves in such a rut that you then can only buy crap players and players that don't work because all of the half-decent players are going to teams above you. Waiting 7 years has then ruined Manchester United. But then ultimately the TV rights will come down, and given our date, if the TV rights come down, we're a finished club.
Daz, are you working on the theory that by what I said there, what I meant is that we should have given David Moyes the entire 7 years?
Yeah. No. Give him 7.
What we should have done is given him more than 1. What we did was we signed a guy, gave him and like anything, if somebody says to you, you've got 7 years, you're thinking you've got a bit of time here. You're thinking, I've got a couple of years here to try and steer Manchester United back to where they should be. After 7 months, you'd be pretty flipping shocked to lose your job. Number 2, the only players we were able to get were Juan Mata and Marouane Fellaini. Now, I love Juan Mata, very good player. I like Marouane Fellaini. But are they your Eric Cantonas? Are they the people that are going to change it? No, they're not. People forget, because they always go, yeah, we won the title in Ferguson's last season, and if he could do it, so should Moyes. No, we all just sat here and said how good Ferguson is. We've all just said that. We know how good he is. He was spectacular at getting miraculous levels of effort and commitment out of players that any other manager probably would have got average performance, a bit like we're seeing now. Like, he had a ridiculous level of ability. And I think the problem that we've got is that people look at that and they just think that because Ferguson won the title with that team, that everybody else should have. The simple fact is that that football team that Alex Ferguson had never should have won that league. We were the best out of a shocking bunch of football teams, and we scraped ourselves across the line there. And as a result of that, everybody was expecting David Moyes to go on and win the league. And he finished 7th. And what's hilarious is everyone has a go at David Moyes, but what has been our average sort of position to be sat in? 7th.
I was going to say, I don't know where, like, what, I know Daz threw out this hypothetical. We've watched it for 10 years, mate. It's not could have happened. It has happened. Solskjaer's the only manager since Ferguson retired to finish in the Champions League back-to-back via league position. No other manager's done it. We are literally in the shoes that Liverpool were in before Klopp, which is we might get up to a second now and again, then we sack our manager, and then we go back into the same rut that it was before. We then finish outside the Champions League for 2 years. We get better because we back the manager. We finish 4th. We demand a title charge because we've got Pogba and Lukaku. Then we sack the manager because Ronaldo didn't do the business. Then we drop down to 7th and 8th. Then we'll start to go back, and it's just a circle. It's a vicious circle.
I get that.
Just to finish off what I was saying about the Moyes thing, was that when they sacked him, what we did was we took all of that. Everyone was just talking about Ferguson. We took all of the power that Ferguson had and the office of manager, and we gave it to the players. What's that, Rio Ferdinand? You're upset because David Moyes stole your chips? Oh, you poor thing. Let's have a go at David Moyes. And the minute we did that, we went to those players and we said, you're in charge of this dressing room. And the minute we did that, Manchester United was finished.
But I think the big problem with David Moyes, and I do agree that 100% no manager should, especially when you've come off the back of someone like Alex Ferguson and being in charge for so long, there's always going to be teething issues. I got that. I think the David Moyes lost me the day when he stepped in front of the media, taking to mind at this point, Man City hadn't won a single title. They hadn't really ever been in Europe, and Manchester United was the most successful club in English history, most successful club in the last 2 years. He came out and he said, we aspire to be like Man City. The minute he said that, he lost me as a manager, and I knew he had to go because they aspired to be us, not the other way around. And I always remember him saying that. And he inherited some really good seasoned players in Rio Ferdinand, Ryan Giggs, and all I could see is a manager that had everything inside him that says, you know what, I'm going to piss Ryan Giggs off today. I'm going to piss Rio Ferdinand off. All the luxuries that they have deserved and earned at the club, I'm going to remove from them. And yeah, that was just something as petty as a chippy night. But, but I'm like, these are the players that are going to help with that transition from Alex Ferguson to David Moyes.
Did they carry on helping us? No, they didn't.
What, sorry?
And did they carry on helping us? No, they didn't. These wonderful players that we're talking about didn't end up. And this is my whole point. We're saying that everybody, and I know you do it, everybody does it. We all sit there and have a go at the players. Marcus Rashford's got too much power. Everyone's having a go at Maguire, too much power. He won't leave the club. Player power, player power, player power, player power. Because we sat David Moyes. And I will not hear different, because that's when we gave it to him. They had no power. Alex Ferguson physically assaulted David Beckham. Physically assaulted. If that happened in any other dressing room now, that bloke would be bloody under, it'd be under lock and key. But instead what we did Was we just went, he went out.
You know what? I kind of get that, and I think this is where one of the issues that I think Erik ten Hag's getting is he is not. You know, I mentioned it a bit ago that he's not the number one man in that dressing room. There's too many people with power in that dressing room. We're at a fine line now because if you sack Erik ten Hag, you ultimately do give that power to other players. I 100% get that. Marcus Rashford then says,
they've already got it.
I've seen 3 managers and I've survived 4 managers and I've survived them all. The only way you replace that is you bring in a manager that has that power and sort of runs his shit the same way Alex Ferguson did, which then falls me back to Carlos Ancelotti. He runs a dressing room full of elite level superstars, but he is always the number one man in that dressing room, and he knows it. And then players respect him for that. And I think it's because he runs his ship as tight as I think Alex Ferguson did, as tight
You
as
say that
Guardiola
we had
did.
Mourinho, and the players didn't respect Mourinho, and we had Van Gaal, and they didn't really respect Van Gaal, because if they did,
do you think if Vinicius Junior went to the Real Madrid board and said, "I'm going to leave your football club if you don't sack Ancelotti," do you think Ancelotti would have a job the next day?
I think Ancelotti would let him leave, and I think he's going to let him leave over the next 12
Real
months.
Madrid wouldn't let him leave.
Do you know why I think they're going to let him leave? Because I think that over the next 12 months, we're going to see a shift that we'll see Mbappe go back on the left, Erling Haaland go up top, I think Vinicius Junior is going to be pushed out and he's going to say, I'm starting or I'm leaving. And I think Real Madrid will just go, bye then.
So what about if it was Mbappe?
And I think they will, and I think Carlos Ancelotti would do that. And I think
no. What I'm saying is if Mbappe went to the Real Madrid president, and said, "I'm going to leave your football club if you don't sack Ancelotti," do you think Real Madrid would keep Ancelotti or keep Mbappe?
I think that's hard, given the position they're in, knowing that I think Mbappe's just come in and Ancelotti's on his way out. But had it have been 5 years ago, I think it would have been the other way around. I think because I don't know, I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying with that, but I think they're so financially connected to the Mbappe deal that I don't think even if they wanted to back Ancelotti, I don't think they can afford to.
Because the point I'm trying to make is
built into that Mbappe deal.
No matter who comes into Manchester United, whether it's this year, next year, whether it's Ten Hag that stays, ultimately, because of the way football is now, and it's changed from 2 decades ago, the players have most of the power anyway. So there's only a special few that will get away with it because of the situations of the club. So if Haaland said to City, it's either me or Pep, they'd back Pep because they've got the money and the finances to resource whatever they want to give him a replacement. But that's it. Every other team is based off players. Can they get rid of them? If they can't get rid, look at Chelsea. Chelsea have desperately tried to sell all of their academy products to stay within PSR. That's not a manager's choice. It's a business choice. So players now, more so than ever, are controlling these teams. So no matter who comes into Manchester United, the players will have more of the power than the manager because the club itself isn't in the position for a manager to go, you 5 are not doing as you're told. There's the door, because they just can't do it. So you're having to rely on players that maybe haven't got the morale to be there or can't do his tactics. This Ten Hag team that he's got is the best that he could have made from what's been available.
And
if you take away the few errors.
When you go and buy your players like your Mbappes, your Ronaldos, these sort of things, they know that with that comes a load of merchandise, comes a loads of money. So actually, when you're playing these people and you're saying to them you're not going to play, and you try and assert your authority over them, they know that they're making the club money. And what makes the world go round?
That's how you manage them relationships. And I'm going to contradict myself because I'm going to mention Klopp again, and you're going to laugh. How did Klopp keep the most productive wingers in the world, the best centre back probably in the world, Fabinho in that conversation as one of the best defensive midfielders in the world at the time? Jordan Henderson could hold his own, best right winger in the world, Sadio Mane at the time, arguably one of the best left wingers in the world. and he had them as some of the cheapest football players in the Premier League in terms of wages. He managed that so they was happy to stay on that wage, so a power struggle never happened. And the first time it did happen was with Mo Salah, and he managed that fantastic. He still managed to get Mo Salah to stay on a better wage, and it did break the Liverpool structure, but it didn't destroy it in the way that, you know, another team would have paid him. And I think that you talk about, I don't think that having a manager like Ancelotti, it would ever come down to a situation of if you don't play him, I'm going to leave or sack the manager. I think he would just manage the squad to the point where them situations would never arise. I mean, look at the minute he's got Modric in that team and has had him for the last 2 years. And I mean, I know Modric is not the player he was 5 years ago, but he is, for me, is still one of the best central midfielders. It's still part of the top 20 for me. Modric is, I think he's still part of the top 20 in his position, but the club's brought in 2 young players whose job was to replace him, but he just managed it so well that Modric is happy being that man on the bench and just being used.
We're putting
when
all of this
needed.
chat about Ancelotti in, though, as if he is some sort of messiah. The fact is that just like Mourinho, just like Van Gaal, he doesn't have to come to Manchester United and do well. His legacy won't be defined by how he comes into Man United. And you've only got to look at how he was at Everton. He didn't like what he was doing there, so he just walked away. You know, he's got this level of, what you need is hungry players and hungry managers. And Ten Hag is hungry. He wants to do well. He didn't leave Ajax, which was a comfortable position for him, where he was doing incredibly well, just for shits and giggles. He came here because he wanted to do well. And just to say here, I mean, you're saying, what about the Ten Hag's treatment of Ronaldo? What about Ronaldo's treatment of everybody else in that dressing room? Like, I know that he's a legend. I know that everybody loves him, but his second time at Manchester United was disgraceful. His attitude was appalling. And quite frankly, one of the worst signings we've ever made, the second Ronaldo signing. I think it's absolutely atrocious. And the reason why Manchester United didn't progress under Ole Solskjaer, because he came in and all of these Billy Bigs, that's the problem. Because it's all about them. What you need is a team. Teams win football matches. Teams win titles. Manchester United won it because they had the best team. Weren't necessarily all the best players. Darren Fletcher, he's never going to be in the top 10 midfielders ever mentioned. You never see people go Lampard, Gerrard, Scholes, or Fletcher. Never happens. He's never in the conversation. But he was awesome because he worked as a team. And I think this is the big thing. We don't.
So do you honestly believe then, honestly, that Erik ten Hag? Okay, we established. I mean, Dan mentioned it himself. For the next 6-7 years, we're not going to catch Man City. No one's going to catch Man. Assuming that nothing comes of the charges next year, you know, they're to stay in that lane. Do you believe? Because I think it would need to happen in the next 3 years if he was going to do it. Do you believe he can put us? He could put us in a position of where Liverpool or Arsenal are now. Do you believe he can take us to at least that level?
Here's the problem. Nobody knows. Nobody, and this is it. Like, everybody sits here, and this is what I love about football, because, like, without it, the shows like this that go on for 2 hours don't exist. But let's be brutally honest. None of us have a fucking clue. Like, we're all sitting here. Like, we're sitting again. If we keep Solskjaer, we'd have won millions of things. If Moyes had stayed forever, you know, we don't know. All I can go by is what I'm seeing now. And is what I'm seeing now better than what I was seeing last season? Yes. Have we managed to score goals? No. Will he do well in 4 years? I don't know. What I'm saying is, let's just get to the end of the season and see how he gets on. There are people coming in, we're a few games into it, and they're going absolutely mental. I can remember, if you want to keep going back to Alex Ferguson, what do we always used to say? We always play our best football in the second half of the season. That's always what we said.
One thing I've noticed you both doing is you're judging Erik ten Hag because he's improved off last season. I don't think it's fair to compare him to a season where he was terrible because of injuries. Comparing to his first season, as he improved, no, he's dropped dramatically. Dramatically from his first season
was a whole season.
Yeah, we'll have to come back at the end of the season and see whether he's won an FA Cup.
I don't think this team looks as good as the team that won the League Cup.
But do you know what, Daz? If we get to March and it don't look like we're getting in the top 4, and actually we still haven't addressed all of these problems, people have got a right to say it. I don't get why we get, and I said this at the beginning of the season, I knew it would happen. The minute you get a loss or two and it goes wrong, everybody's there. Everybody's there. And we don't know that, Dav. That's just your opinion. And you're completely welcome to it, but don't throw it across so it's a fact, because we don't know that. He's not poor. If he was poor, he wouldn't win 2 trophies. Mourinho wasn't poor. He won 2 trophies. It was just shite football. And this is the thing. Everybody, I think it was Ricky Gervais who said it, everybody thinks their opinion is fact. My opinion is worth more than your fact. And the fact is, you need to give people a chance in order to show what they can do. And these people expecting immediate, if you're expecting that in football, let me tell you, I never say this, I usually reserve it for Stu Willie, but if you're thinking it's going to happen like that, you know nothing about football.
No, but time at any top football club needs to be earned. And I don't mean earned by trophies, because I do believe 2 trophies in 2 years for any manager at Manchester United, is good.
For any football club. My God, Arsenal would love some trophies.
We need to see a style of play emerge, and after 2 years, we've not seen one. We need to see a system evolve, and after 2 years, we've not seen one. I sit here today, and I couldn't honestly tell you that Erik ten Hag knows who his best 11 is. I don't think he knows that.
I've got a question for
You
you,
know
Dan.
who our best 11 is.
No,
I've got a question.
After 2.5 years, there needs to be some sort of identity of this is what the starting 11 sort of looks like. And we don't know that, and he doesn't know that.
You're not seeing it, and it's there. There is.
I've got a question because A, I've got work in the morning, and B, we're on 2 hours.
Yeah, me too.
What was your predictions for the start of the season, Daz?
My prediction.
Yeah. Where did you predict to finish?
You know what? Being optimistic in one of my lives, I said Man United would finish 3rd. And the reason why I said Man United would finish 3rd is because I genuinely believed we was a closer team to the first season that did finish 3rd. I thought we've ironed out some kinks from that first season by bringing certain players in. And I thought that finishing 3rd was achievable. I thought that we'd just click this year. Now, I did say in the live when I was with you guys at the beginning of the season, I think it was after the Community Shield, that because of what's gone on in the club, we could potentially be a worse season, but still progress as a whole club and still moving in the right direction. But although the club has dramatically improved, and we just talk about the Ineos and the board to evidence that, and I think the recruitment's right, given the fact that we've just bought an amazing right back for pennies, which you never see at Man United. And the deals that have been done at, I think, a good rate. That's all improved. But I wanted something to emerge on the pitch. And I know you can argue, because I've said it myself, we're just goals away from being second in the league, because we could have easily been in that position right now. But we're not getting goals. We're not. And there was even times in his first season where we was grinding out 1-0 wins, and we just wasn't getting enough goals in his first season. Do we, after 2.5 years, just accept that this is a manager that is just going to win 1-2-0? And I think, I don't know. I don't know. I think for me, I wasn't bothered about the position.
Ineos have said it's going to take 4 transfer windows. We've only had 1.
For me.
You what? Sorry.
For me,
Ineos said it will be 4 transfer windows before we get a club that's at the level it would want to be at, and we had 1.
I think
that's Ineos that have said that, not Ten Hag. Ineos has said we're going to need 4 transfer windows, and we've given them 1, and everyone's having a go at Ten Hag. We need 4. And this is where you have your argument with people like Dav. No, all right, maybe Mainu isn't supposed to be a 6. But again, people keep using these numbers as if all of a sudden they've turned into, I don't know, who's a really good analyst of football. Because genuinely, we all, they've got to play in the 6, they've got to play in the 9. Listen, these players are capable of doing it. They're absolutely capable of being in a situation where they can perform in midfield. Being a defensive midfielder isn't that much different to being a central midfielder. It's not. that comes down to your ability to do certain things. Can I tackle? Can I do this? Kobe Mainu is not the problem playing at a 6. I trust him doing that. That's not a problem. Is he the long-term answer for it? Probably not. But the point is, you've got to get these players in. And to do that, as Dan's already mentioned, you've got to have the money. We ain't got it. You
the point I was trying to make is
to make magic. Unless we get into Aladdin and we rub a lamp, we've got no hope.
The point I was trying to make when I was asking Daz about where he thought we would finish is, from what you've seen that this season, to say, for me to be able to say that Ten Hag should leave. I know I flip-flopped, Beanie, before you come at me, because I was on the fence the other week.
I'll come at you for that.
For me to be able to say this season that Ten Hag's got to go, he's got to be way below my lowest expectation of the club this season. And I said we'd finish 6th and have a good cup run. And that is an improvement on last year, as long as the football is better. So as long as the football stays good and it looks like it could be positive, and the Brighton game would be the best example. We ended up on the losing side and we probably should have won, because that will turn in our favour eventually. So if we get to Christmas and we're 12th, I'll be going, we're not even close enough to the worst sort of place I thought we would be this season, but it still would be an improvement. But then what I'm trying to get at is, if people are saying 3rd, 1st, so we had it at the start of the season. Mr. Commode said, I can't believe you got Spurs finishing above us. And I was like, well, they did last year. And it's that sort of thing. The expectation at Manchester United is just too high at the minute. The club is not where people think it is. We're not going to finish 3rd, 2nd, 1st. How we've even lifted an FA Cup and a League Cup is a miracle in the last 2 seasons. And that is, as Beanie pointed out about Spurs sniffing something, which made me laugh. That it's a mirror. Our worst season and worst period in history is still better than 99.9% of clubs. So you've got to be sort of, where is the worst place where I think we could finish this year and still be an improvement? And if he's not hitting that come the middle of the season, then start saying, yeah, maybe it's enough. But he's had enough time now. Again, I know I flip-flop greatly here. It's not enough time. If 5 games is not enough time to say he's had enough of the new structure, blah, blah, blah. Do you know what? If the football was dire and it was like last season where we was conceding 39 shots a game and do you know what I mean? There was mistakes galore and massive holes in midfield, I'd be sat here saying the same as you, saying there's been no improvement. We need to chop him, get him out. But I've seen enough to think, do you know what? Give him a little bit more time. We could still finish 6th and we can still have a cup run. And I still maintain, realistically, that would be a good season for us.
And genuinely, Dan, I mean, I think you're right. I mean, and the last little point we'll say on this, because we are going to have to close at some point, which, as you say, so we have got work in the morning. It's been a long one. But genuinely, this whole idea of just against last year, let's take it to 2 years ago. Then let's take it to when Ten Hag had his best season and we had David De Gea in goal. And we tried to play the ball out from the back. And all I kept hearing people say was, we don't have the goalkeeper to do what he's doing. Well, we're playing the ball out the back now, and it ain't as bad. It's moving forward. We are seeing the ball move from the back of our pitch to the front of our pitch beautifully, more often than not. And that's a progression. So it's not just about last year. It's about understanding that the game is going forward the way that I personally think that it should. We're going to finish it off here, but there's 3 things I wanted to put in here. Number 1, that's what I'm saying, guys, this was fun. More of Daz. Absolutely. Let me be clear. Every opinion is welcome here. Just because I've disagreed with you doesn't mean you're wrong. It just means I disagree. And the only difference is that my face is here and you've only got the ability to write on text. But if you want to come on, let me know. I'll get you on. It's not a problem. I'm more than happy for you to come here and have the ability to talk about it and say what you want to say. And I'm not suggesting that Twente necessarily wants to do that, but I'm saying that for you. And I'm not saying your opinion's wrong, Gav. Absolutely not. What I'm saying is people keep talking about these positions, but it's always the entirety of it. I said it before. We're going to get 2 games into a season. Somebody's not going to do well, and so we're going to need to sell that person. We can't sell them till January. So why are we getting so excited about it? Leave it till January and see if the performances are still terrible then. Instead, we jump on their back and then we wonder why it is they never get any better. Because they are seeing it, as Daz has already said. They see it in their papers. They see it in their social media feeds. They know that the fans are on their back. it's not going to be conducive to him doing well. And I'm not suggesting you're doing that, but I'm just saying that that's what people need to do. They've got to understand how football is working nowadays. And like Baz says, we're a goal scorer away from it working. Performances are much better. The results will do Ten Hag. It won't just be the results. It will be some of our fans. If they
I do agree with that. What Andy's just put. My question is, where are we finding that within this team? Because obviously we're not going to buy one. Even if we did say we're going to buy a new centre forward, which we're not, for all of the reasons Dan's mentioned in the lives, you know, with the way the club works, because we've just invested in 2 centre forwards in the last two windows or so. Where are we finding that? Because I do like Hoyland, I do like parts of what Xerxes offers, but they're not going to be ready for 2-3 seasons. You know, it's going to take them a while to get there.
I mean, exactly. It's going to take them a while, and it's almost like that's part of the reason why they brought in a world-class striker who was the best striker we've ever had at the football club to do the coaching.
It's patience.
It's exactly
literally all it's patience.
Like that, had it
You've
right.
got to be willing.
Patience.
You've got to be willing to back him enough that it turns.
But that is still under the potential that they are the right man to do that. I mean, what frustrates me, you know, about this whole not being able to score goals is we are a football club. And I know it's living in the past, but I'm going to go from Matt Busby all the way, you know, I could go all the way to Alex Ferguson. We are a club that are known for having world-class goal scorers. What has fundamentally gone wrong to the point where I don't think we've had one since Wayne Rooney.
It's
not a man that can clinically. Why is that not being produced anymore? Because coaching staff over Alex Ferguson's time did evolve. It did change. It didn't always have the same people around him. What has changed?
I can give you the answer to that.
Why can't we produce that anymore?
I can give you the answer to that, and it will be the end of the show when I do. But the answer to that is we shouldn't have sacked David Moyes. And that's the answer to that question. And on that, ladies and gentlemen, we bid you adieu. It's been, I think, probably the longest show we've ever done that's not a watch along, but it has been fun. I have enjoyed it. Like I say, your opinions matter. You've been heard. You might not have been agreed with. It says be heard. It won't mean that we're going to sit here and stroke your ego and tell you that we agree with you. I've not agreed with half of what Daz has said tonight, but it doesn't mean we're going to come out of here and I'm going to go, that's it. We're never going to have Daz on again. It's your opinions. And that's all it's about. And that's the absolute point of it. We walk out of here today. I'm still going to like Daz. Hopefully Daz is still going to like me. And it's not a drama. We go in as Man United fans. We come out as Man United fans. We come out united. Why are you laughing? What's happened in the chat that I've not seen whilst I'm getting ready?
Beanie's on fire.
That's about Beanie, I think, has had a couple of pints. I also like the fact that we had some Take That songs coming in. It only takes a minute. Very good. On that one, we'll just wait for the greatest day, shall we? But until then, we just have to leave it at that. Good night, everybody. It's been superb. Thank you, guys, and we will see you next time.